Did you know the human eye can see more shades of green than any other color? What? I said, did you know that the human eye can see more shades of green than any other color? My question for you is why?
So it's a good question, and it's one that we're going to spend this lesson answering, but let's first have a look at our regular 6 questions to begin with. So first one of which is, what type of reproduction is mitosis used for? Second is, how many gametes are produced during meiosis? Third is, how many chromosomes are there in a diploid cell? Fourth, how many stages of development does a new drug need to pass through? 5 is, why did Mendeleev leave gaps in his periodic table? And finally, 6 is, which hormone is responsible for the fight or flight response? Okay, so quickly going through the answers. Mitosis is used for asexual reproduction, that's generating clones. Mitosis creates identical cells. Gametes in meiosis is 4, you get 2 divisions to end up with 4 cells. Diploid cells have 46 chromosomes. A new drug has to pass through 4 stages of development, that's computer trials, human tissue trials, animal trials, full human clinical testing. Mendeleev left gaps in his periodic table for elements that had not yet been discovered. And 6, that hormone for fight or flight was adrenaline. Good. So that clip that we started with it then is from Fargo. I have, like all of us, been watching a lot of Netflix over lockdown, and I saw that clip and I thought it'd make a good starter to this lesson. So the reason the human eye can see more shades of green than anything else is because of evolution, and it's an adaptation. It allows us to see any animals that might be camouflaged within forest areas, whether that's so that we can see them and stop them eating us, or so we can see them, catch them and eat them ourselves. And this is what we're going to look at today, how evolution takes place. And it's all based around those processes we looked at last lesson. So mitosis and meiosis, we looked at how they work and how they duplicate lots of genetic information to produce variation in cells so that we can have variation as a species. But occasionally those processes, both mitosis and meiosis, can go wrong, and these create mutations, and it's these mutations that drive evolution. And so we're going to look at exactly how that process works today, and we're going to start by looking at how the giraffe ended up with a long neck as an example. And we'll do that by going over pen and paper. I will draw some beautiful pictures of giraffes, and then we'll come back here to discuss. Okay, so let's start by thinking about what a giraffe would look like without a long neck. It would just be a fancy looking horse, really. And that fancy looking horse that giraffes started life out as, much as the one I'm drawing here, would have to compete with other animals for food. So grass on the ground, bushes. It wouldn't be able to access those nice berries and plants at the top of trees. And it would have to compete with this hamster looking thing, this deer looking thing. I wasn't too sure what giraffes would compete with. And it would also have to worry about lions, which would find it nice and easy to catch and eat. One day though, a giraffe would be born with a slightly longer neck than the other giraffes, and this is just chance that this happened. There would be lots and lots of giraffes without this long neck, but one here, the one on the right, has a slightly longer neck, and this gave it an ever so slight advantage. It meant that it could grab the food at the top of the trees that the other couldn't, and this is caused by a random genetic mutation. It's just chance that this happened. But that mutation gave it an advantage. It meant it had more food, and so it was more likely to survive. And if an animal is more likely to survive, it's more likely to be able to recreate. It's more likely to find a mate, it's more likely to have offspring, to breed,
And if it breeds, it is therefore more likely to pass on that genetic mutation, to pass on its advantage. And that means that over millions of years of this process continuing, eventually all the species will have that same mutation. All the ones that didn't die out, they either starve or the lion eats them all, and so all the giraffes then have a long neck. Had that mutation not been an advantage, had it been brightly coloured like this, that mutation would very quickly die out, and so the species would die as well. This one would be very easy to catch. That whole process, it's worth reiterating, takes place over millions of years. It's not just one generation of variations and adaptations, it's multiple ones, which means that the giraffe would have got its long neck over millions of years. It would have gradually got bigger, more adapted, better suited for purpose. And all animals as we see them now have gone through a similar process. And it is the exact same process. So we're going to have a look at an exam question now, which talks about a different species, a different animal, and we're just applying the exact same knowledge to that question and to that answer. We use the same keyword, it describes the same process. Okay, so this is a tough exam question, but really it's just asking us to outline the process of evolution. So we'll start by saying there is a random genetic mutation. This is the key first step to evolution, and putting it down straight away shows that you know what you're talking about and gets you a mark. And this random genetic mutation led to variation in the species. Okay, and this variation, it can be an advantage or not. We don't really need to talk about that at this point, but sometimes it's worth mentioning, showing that you understand that there are two different types. The best adapted, those best variations, will be more likely to survive. Okay, and if they're more likely to survive, they are more likely to pass on genes because they're more likely to breed, and so they're more likely to have more offspring. This process is exactly the same regardless of the animal. So here we're looking at humans, looking at gorillas, but in the lesson today we looked at giraffes. In the presentation there's a lizard thing. Lots of different versions of the same basic process. Okay, this process over millions of years results in bigger changes to the species. So it results in new species forming. Okay, if the changes are great enough, those species divert and you have a brand new species. It's important to say over millions of years so that you show you know it's not just overnight. Okay, so we've done the hard bit, we've talked about evolution here. Now it's just about linking it to this diagram that we have over here. So my diagram shows these changes. Okay, and what it does is it shows the similarities. So you can see, well, these two things are related, but it also shows that these similarities, it shows certain things remain, but also that there have been some differences over the years. So the skull has, however, become more rounded. Okay, so you're showing, I understand that these are clearly related, they've clearly got some similarities, but also there's been a difference over the year. It's become more adapted, it's become more varied. And this last bit here about looking at fossil records is what we're going to look at a little more next lesson. As I ended on there in that exam question, next lesson is about looking at fossil records and other evidence of evolution. So we've looked at
how it works. Now we're going to go on next lesson to look at the evolution.